submitted for your approval. Someone who finally got their shit together and started listening to this fine Dragus production. As an unseen consequence, they became more popular at parties, got laid more often, and learned to order from the Taco Bell secret menu. All this and more, just for tuning in to the Dragus Productions.
Listen up, Buttercup. You are about to listen to the Censorship Sucks Roundtable Radio Show, where all celebrity voices are imitations or some sort of deep state artificial intelligence. Also, the views and opinions expressed on the show are intended as entertainment only. I don't want to see Dragus Productions end up like me. Do you have any idea how many of these stupid voiceovers I have to do to earn $1 billion? They tried to take my cat, Mushi. Hang in there, baby.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Censorship Sucks Roundtable Radio Show Wednesday night edition, where I often reach out to some of the more intelligent people I know. And tonight is no exception. We've got with us the great Brent Hamachek once again. How you doing, Brent?
Couldn't be any better. Sorry you couldn't find anybody intelligent, but at least I was on time this month. So I've upped my game.
Yeah, I called a bunch of random people in the phone book, but none of them were available. So
it's usually how I get picked, going all the way back to the high school prom. So I'm used to it.
There you go. Excellent, excellent. So I hope everything's going well. We're starting to see the beginning of summer here. Things are picking up, and man, I'm really looking forward to a nice long summer here. Are you as well?
Well, here in the People's Republic of Illinois, where we've had no spring, it remains sort of below average temperatures. And I don't know, I figure at most we've got 90 days of weather to enjoy, but it ain't quite here yet. So,
bummer.
Yeah, it's not Speedo weather in your backyard, which is probably just as well, especially at my age.
Yeah, and if it is Speedo weather, we don't need the camera every time you're on, you know. It's nice to see your face, but yeah, you know, we can, in case of emergency, we can break glass, you know.
Yeah, but I might be in pretty good shape for 63, but I'm still 63, right? So
yeah,
nothing looks the way it used to.
I've loved the summers back in Chicago, man. I remember, you know, living in the Gold Coast there, and I could just walk about 2 blocks over to the beach, and I had Oak Street Beach, literally a 5-minute walk from my front door. And it was very shocking to me that Chicago is just a beach town, you know, it really is in the summer. Although,
well, it's nice. It's nice now in the summer because since you don't have to wear a heavy coat, it's easier when you get robbed because you don't have to like unzip and pull stuff out of a bunch of pockets. You know, you can just kind of hand over your fanny pack and then keep going. But I wouldn't recommend necessarily walking around Chicago much. Even what you call the Gold Coast has had more than its share of crime these last few years.
Yeah, and it's a shame because I remember moving there and watching the neighborhood revitalize. You know, this was around 2000. No, this is the 90s. It really, you know, some of the places that were like a market or whatever got shut down, and a big steakhouse opened up there, a big fancy place, you know, $100 a plate, that kind of stuff. And it really, man, that neighborhood down there, just like Division, Rush, State Street, it turned into just such a beautiful place. And I just can't, I would be sad, I think, to go back and see it today. I can't imagine that it's anything like it was when I was there.
Yeah, well, they got rid of the Cabrini Green, the famous Cabrini, I can't talk, toy boat, Cabrini Green housing projects on Division Street. But, you know, so I guess that's good on some level. But look, Chicago is a mess in every way. I'd like to say to people, it's a beautiful city from the waist up. You could argue it has the nicest skyline in the country on some level. It's a beautiful skyline. But when you go down below the waist and you get down to where the folks are that we call humans, it's not so good anymore. And the city's really deteriorated.
That's a shame. I mean, it really is. It's I guess it's happening all over the place. I'm constantly seeing how New York is just a shadow of its former self and whatnot. But anyway, enough small talk. I wanted to get into some stuff with you because Okay, this article kind of ticked me off because I mean, I'm not maybe part of your guys' organization, but I'm adjacent to human events. And the SPLC this last week labeled Turning Point what, a hate group, added to the list of hate
Right.
groups, Nazi adjacent, all that, beautiful stuff, the KKK, putting them. And Charlie, I watched an interview with him and Laura Ingraham, I think it was. He was not happy about it. And I bet there were a lot of people in your organization over at Human Events that were not happy about this designation because it's a slap in the face to common sense and the good work that you guys are doing.
Well, my thoughts on it are a little bit different. I'm always really quite amazed when people are amazed that the pyromaniacs set a fire. I mean, that's what they do.
Yeah.
And the idea that, the Southern Poverty Law Center did that, my reaction is quite different. My reaction is uh, I get, Charlie being angry and frustrated. Of course, he needs to be. I would be astonished if he were astonished by it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, look, there's no healing of the great division in America. That's a myth, and everything's as divided as it was before November, before January, and so this group has long been doing this with all sorts of groups that they've labeled as hate groups. And the way they've treated pro-life groups, not something I'm a member of, if you will, in terms of a movement, but folks that are reasonably against abortion and giving those kinds of groups the same sort of designations. I mean, this is what they do. So let's not be too consumed, to use a clever term, when the pyromaniac starts a fire.
Yeah.
In fact, I almost think on some level we give more credence to it by giving credence to it. We just shouldn't pay any attention to it at all. There's not a single donor that Turning Point has who's going to not give them money tomorrow because of this. If anything, it's likely good for business in that sense. So Charlie should view it as free marketing. He knows how to take advantage of it with newsletters and fundraising pieces and other things. So revel in the critique from those with whom you criticize in the first place. And so nobody in Turning Point has ever been a fan of that organization. And so I guess when that organization says they're not a fan either, they should say, good, we didn't make a mistake, right? We had you pegged the right way.
You're making all the right enemies.
Yeah. It's a really graphic example, and some people may be mortified by it, but I sat in a small room with Ann Coulter probably 15 years ago or so, and during a private dinner, and someone got up and said, Ann, you take all these personal attacks, all this personal hatred directed at you, and it's so bitter and nasty. How do you deal with that? And she said, look, a lot of the people that hate me are people who believe that it's okay to take a long needle and stick it into the back of a skull of a partially delivered child and suck its brains out. She said, if those kinds of people hate me, I'm happy about that. And so I think perhaps you can measure your own prestige by the quality of your enemies.
Mm-hmm. So you were blessed to be in the same room as her beautiful swan-like neck.
Yes. Well, Ann used to make appearances in Chicago, and we would do some entertaining afterwards. And she's got quite a public reputation. I can only say that my experience with her outside the public eye was always one of somebody very gracious, funny, very kind to wait staff in a way that you wish everybody would be. Found her always to be very engaging and charming off stage.
Okay. Well, good. I wanted to bring that up with you and just kind of get your reaction to it. And it's about what I would expect, like screw them. Who cares? You know what I mean? It's not going to change anything. If anything, it's probably more money in you guys, coffers. So good for you guys. And as Charlie said, this is a washed up organization that's been fleecing scared grandmas for decades. So I kind of like that quote.
That sounds like vintage Charlie.
Yeah, very much vintage Charlie. So let's see. It's June, so that means it's Pride Month. Yet we're not seeing the same types of avatars everywhere. We're just not seeing Pride Month front and center. I think it was Boise, Idaho had to cancel their parade altogether due to a lack of committed people willing to go to it. Is that a reversal of a major trend that you're seeing, Brent, or is it just that they're kind of scared of the Trump administration for the time being and sort of holding back?
Well, first of all, it's really a great question, right? I mean that. That's a great question. And I suspect that the answer to it is comes in many parts. And I would think that part of it is, there's plenty of people in the gay community. And some of the things I'm going to say right now are going to perhaps be unpopular with a conservative audience, but and certainly they might be unpopular with the evangelical side of a conservative audience. But I'll get there. But a lot of members of the gay community for a while have been incredibly unhappy with having been paired with the transgender movement. So from, in terms of homosexuality, something that as an orientation has only been, discussed and understood for about 200 years, the notion that it goes back to the Bible is simply factually false. But as an orientation, and we have some science, right, that indicates that folks who are that way, to some very good extent, are born that way. The genetic research done at Northwestern University a decade plus ago kind of proved that with their work on identical twins. So here are a group of folks who have an orientation with regard to their sexual preference, and they've been lumped into, and it's like everything else. None of this is universal. Some don't mind, but many do mind that they've been lumped in with a group of people who voluntarily decide that instead of being a boy, they're going to be a girl, right? And these two things are simply not the same. Now, the transgender movement was smart to attach to the world of homosexual rights and activism and so on, because over time that group has become much more accepted, mainstream, and so they hitched onto that wagon. And so then you look at current times and you said, are they sort of laying low because of the Trump administration? Well, the Trump administration certainly has aggressively attacked the transgender movement, not the homosexual community, but the transgender movement. But the transgender movement has become a big part of Pride Month, right? Over time, over say this last decade. So going back to your thing, do you think they're laying low? I suspect that a good many of them are. And that deflates some energy. And, if you're going to have a big parade or a big celebration, and perhaps your most recently active group is lying low, to use your term, that probably impacts it. And to the extent that the homosexual community may be laying low at all, I think one of the very, very concerning things, and I can't use enough of the word very here, has been the increasing rise of what I'll call sort of militant Christianity, and within the evangelical movement, really turning its sights on homosexuality. Now, I've never seen anything out of Donald Trump that indicates he believes that. Any of it. I haven't. Maybe it's out there. I've missed it if it exists. So I don't think any of this lays at Trump's doorstep. But I do think his success in having this movement about Make America Great Again allows people who support him to sort of attach to that whatever they want to attach to it. And I think that we've seen sort of a rise in this sort of militant evangelical attitude. And that could certainly have some sort of effect on what I'll call just the good old-fashioned mainstream homosexual community. And I think that's a shame. I think it's dangerous. And I can't speak out strongly enough against it.
Yeah, you know, when I was growing up, I worked in a bunch of different restaurants and a lot of fine dining, in college and whatnot. And I knew tons of gay people that I worked with and hung out with, was friends with, hey, we're going to have a party. You want to come by? Sure. Go hang out. I'd never had a problem with gay or lesbian at all. And to this day, I don't whatsoever. What someone wants to do in their bedroom is their decision. But what I see, and you touched on this, is the trans community is really, they're trying to take gay people and say, because you're gay, you probably were born in the wrong body. And that to me is the mortal sin here. There's a lot of tomboys. We used to just call him a tomboy, the girl who liked to play football and run around with the guys and get muddy. And, today that's a flag that maybe you're in the wrong sex. And I think that's so dangerous to be putting people into that sort of a position at that young age to try to convince them that, no, you were born a girl, but you're probably a boy really deep down. And that's the thing that's always got me. And I think it's going to be the ultimate division between those two communities. Because, the trans community would in essence make the homosexual community go extinct if they could. They would just transition them all. And then what are you left with? A bunch of people whose suicide rates are probably going to be much higher than they would otherwise. So I don't know. From that perspective, I tend to agree with you.
Well, right. You make some very, very insightful points. Militant movements are always about conquest, and they're about conquest over any one of a variety of things, right? Pick the movement and pick the time in history and pick the place. And so the idea that within that transgender movement, there could be an element of conquest. I think that's an idea that's 280 yards off the tee, middle of the fairway. And of course, it's a funny thing about conquest. The other folks typically don't like to be conquered. And so I don't know, over time, these things tend to ebb and flow. What will be interesting to see is that, I mentioned over these past, say, 20 plus years in mainstream America, homosexuality is now, for the most part, it's a shoulder shrug to most people. I was at a conference in early May down in Atlanta, Georgia, or Savannah, Georgia, excuse me, and met a gentleman at that conference, Republican, conservative, Trump supporter, evangelical, and gay. And he's running for mayor of Atlanta. I don't live there. I don't have any idea of what his chances are of winning. My thought is if he loves the Constitution, he doesn't have much chance of winning mayor of Atlanta. But look, the fact that he's at a conference, of the Job Creators Network filled with conservatives, if you will, in some shape, manner, or form, and he's very comfortable being exactly who he is, well, that shows you that, probably America's made some changes, right? And so what will be interesting to see is if the transgender movement ultimately prevails in having that sort of mainstream recognition. My suspicion is it will not, because I think you saw some of that in the 2024 election. I think that for most people, coming to accept that some men are attracted to men and some women are attracted to women, they can eventually work through that. But the idea that some men are actually girls and some girls are actually men, that might be just a bridge too far. So we'll see. Good reason to live another couple decades and see how it plays out.
Yeah. And they're just pushing it too far. I mean, if I can lose my child because the school is trying to transition that young boy into a girl behind my back, and I don't agree with that, and suddenly, in California and Oregon, they can just come and say, all right, well, we're going to take him away from you if you're not going to support this. That to me is a bridge too far. And really it just needs to get toned down a little bit. We can all accept that some people want to transition to a different, sex. That's fine. I really don't have a problem with that. But when you start forcing it militantly into the schools and onto unsuspecting children, that's when I think everybody has a real problem with it. Would you agree with that?
Oh, I absolutely do. The inclusion and the sort of recruiting of minors into this is bad enough. And then when you get into the physical alteration of minors, that gets even worse. I mean, look, any of us who have ever had kids know the conversation we have with either our sons or daughters when they're early teens and they want to get their first piercing, right? If it's their ears, kind of okay, but more okay if you're a girl. But be careful, and you still play a lot. You could get those torn out, right? They want to get their nose pierced. We're a little bit stronger. They want to get other stuff pierced. We're saying no. Well, so parents have long had, in the most basic level, a very, sort of primal concern about the physical alteration of their children. Well, if we still struggle with the notion of when should you have your right ear pierced, then it stands to reason that having, hormone therapy and non-reversible therapy and physical surgery corrections are probably a big deal. And perfectly understandable for parents to demand their right to be involved in that sort of process.
Yeah. Yeah. Tattoos as well, I think, are another good example.
Tattoos. Yeah. I never, it's not like when any of my daughters turned 12, I said, all right, girls, time for a tramp stamp. It's not the way it works.
No, exactly. So, and you got to control on that. Now, we got about 2.5 minutes before the break, so let's talk about some of your work that you're doing. What's new with Common Ground?
Well, we have interest in events coming up for the fall at some pretty big name schools, so that's good. We've launched social media platforms finally. We're on X and Instagram and Facebook and all that good happy nonsense, so people can go and look for Common Ground Campus and follow along. We're very grateful that we got some support early this year from the Diana Davis Spencer Foundation for our program, and trying to parlay that sort of credibility into getting other folks to be interested to donate and help us. So I find more and more as I meet more people and talk about it, the genuine love for our mission, of trying to get young people to think critically, engage constructively, and solve problems instead of arguing about issues. And, we had a great event here in Chicago, of all places, in April. I think we talked last month maybe, but we had students from Loyola University and Northwestern University come together to clean up Loyola Beach, roughly a mile-long stretch of beach and park. Pizza was had by all, and everyone who participated thought it was a great experience. We had students from the Young Republicans, the Young Democrats, different groups. I spent a lot of time, especially during the pizza part, just sitting and talking with them, right? And the most fascinating conversations were really with the students from Team Left, and understanding that, they're not really quite as crazy as people want to paint them out to be. And so, if you've got a young person in your life and you think their politics are nuts, try having a conversation with them. And when you have a conversation with them, make it a conversation. That means you're asking questions, you're listening to answers, you're sharing thoughts, but you're not trying to preach to them and convert them. It doesn't work.
Yeah.
It doesn't work with grown-ups. It doesn't work with children. But just the engagement and understanding where they're coming from, I got to tell you, it's the best part of the program is, for me, is when I get a chance to do that.
Excellent. It sounds like good progress. So, folks, we're going to take a quick break. I've got with me Brent Hamachek from humanevents.com. This is the Censorship Sucks Roundtable Radio Show, and we will be right back after this short commercial break.
There are people in most countries who would like to live in the Republic of the United States or the Dominion of Canada, where that good Olga coal is sold. The citizens of our free countries are the envy of many people elsewhere because of the personal freedom which we have enjoyed. Why, then, doesn't every country adopt a form of free government? One answer is that, unfortunately, there are people and parties in many nations who are so greedy for power that they will sacrifice the freedom of their fellow countrymen to obtain power for themselves. History, even recent history, is replete with such instances. That is why the citizens of the Republic of the United States and the Dominion of Canada must be careful to recognize at its very beginning any movement to steal or limit their freedom. That is not always easy. The man who would enslave a free people doesn't begin by saying, "Now I'm going to be your dictator." Instead, he probably will claim that he is a devoted supporter of personal freedom, but all the while he will support policies that weaken and undermine personal freedom. Such a man will deny any totalitarian aims, but free citizens must not be deceived by such denials. Apparently, it is a cardinal principle of every sincere totalitarian that he is justified in lying, if such lies will advance his plans. In these times, no public figure and no party or organization supporting such a person can be accepted without careful consideration. Every public figure and organization must be carefully scrutinized, and if their real aims are to limit or to destroy our freedom as individuals, they must be opposed and defeated.
back to the Censorship Sucks Roundtable Radio Show. Man, that break went quick. Brent and I were reminiscing about our times in Chicago, and it turns out we've got a lot more in common than we were aware. We were pretty much hanging out in the same neighborhoods at the same time. So good times, man. Good times. Let me ask you now, let's get back into some politics here. The auto pen fiasco. This is saying, there's people out there saying this is bigger than Watergate and whatnot. And, we don't really know who the president was over the last, at least 2 of the last 4 years with Joe Biden. And auto pens were used to sign all kinds of pardons and commutations and you name it. And I don't know. What do you make of all this? Was there a shadow government that just signed whatever they wanted? Or do you think he was even aware of half the stuff going on?
Well, I'm going to go back in time, and I'll go back to the 2020 election and in the months leading up to it. When I used to do, I don't do a lot of media anymore. I'm just busy doing other stuff. And I love doing your show every month, but it's fun. And then every once in a while, something pops up. Did a very fun interview last week with Alan Dershowitz, by the way, that I'll share with you.
Really?
Your audience might enjoy it. Extraordinary conversation for 30 minutes with just an absolute champion of individual liberty in this country and civil rights. But in any case, I used to do a lot of media back then. And I was very much on the record as saying it was clear that Joe Biden had dementia, early onset dementia, that anybody who's ever been around it could tell that. And anyone who was watching him in 2020 and was saying, oh, he's fine, was either a pathological liar or they were just sort of ignorant in the true sense, right? Where they just didn't know, right? Maybe they just never been exposed. But, my mother died from Alzheimer's. I've had other family members with dementia. So I've seen vascular dementia and I've seen the Alzheimer's disease. Crystal clear in 2020 that he had cognitive issues. So now you skip forward to today and we're uncovering this whole, shadow government and the auto pen and big investigations and Comer Watts witnesses and all that's fine. Investigate it. But it's almost like, to me, where we started the show with the Southern Poverty Law Center and criticizing Turning Point. I mean, I don't know what anybody expected. And here's what we didn't see. So these Republicans, for whom I have virtually no use, not because they're not Democrats. I don't have any use for them either. I'm just equally sort of hateful. These Republicans who are demanding all these investigations now and acting so upset, you know what? There were a small handful over the prior 4 years that were coming out and questioning Joe Biden's cognitive ability. But most of the small handful were doing it around this time last year. And then after that first debate, then they got very vocal, right? Election coming up, everybody on the debate, they all saw it on TV. But, where were they for the first 3.5 years of Biden's term, standing on the Capitol steps and saying, American people, your president has dementia. You need to know this. You've got to be aware. You need to demand that something happen. No, for a whole variety of cowardly political reasons and calculus, they didn't say anything. So either those Republicans were A, pathological liars, or they were just simply ignorant. So I look at this investigation and it's another shoulder shrug for me. Because of course there was a shadow government. You could tell in 2020 that if he was elected, there would have to be a shadow government because it was clear as crystal that he had cognitive issues.
And I would invite anyone out there to go to the archives of this radio show and pull up anything from October 2020, September 2020, and we were screaming from the top of our lungs that the guy had dementia, and it was so obvious. There's sniffing the kids. I mean, you put him anywhere in the same room with a 5-year-old girl, and watch out. You know, he's going to beeline right to her and start smelling her hair. It was freaky and weird. You know, Barry, I see you speaking up. You were there.
Oh
yeah. You know, the level of dishonesty with American politicians is just, you know, it's just absolutely mind-numbing. You know, and this new spending bill, another great example of it. You know, it's kind of funny. I was on your show before the election saying, you know, one good reason to vote for Trump was that we'd get Elon, because Elon was so great as a business leader prior. And then Trump gets elected and Elon comes in, and I say on your show to your audience, I want to take that back, because Elon was such a train wreck while he was in government. And now I love Elon again because he is speaking out loud and clear about this bill that I certainly hope on both a personal and economics level that the Senate really fights back on it. It's a mess. It's a disaster. And but you know, our politicians and the lack of honesty and courage, makes some very insightful points. Doesn't make it above the fold in the New York Times.
And we've got Jake Tapper putting out this revolutionary new book that he interviewed 200 people for, right? So if that's one person a day he interviewed for the last 200, I mean, that puts it right well back before the election. You know, he was clearly working on this thing well before November of last year, you know. And it just goes to show, like, how many major stories over the last 5 years, 10 years did Jake Tapper miss completely? From COVID, you know, the election, the 2020 steal, the on and on and on. They've been wrong about everything. 6 feet to, you know, to 2 weeks to halt the spread, 6 feet to stop, you know, the spread, masks, shutting down schools. I could go on and on. Defund the police. Defund the police has been a big crying call. They don't say it so much anymore, but boy, were they shouting that at the top of their lungs 3-4 years ago. You know, defund the police, get rid of cops. We don't need them. And look at where society's come. So how can we take any of these people seriously when they are missing all these major stories that I have been right on, you've been right on, Barry's been right on. We've been talking about this stuff out in the open for the whole time. And it's so frustrating to see them just so wrong on everything. And yet somehow they're still getting the big checks and the multi-million-dollar contracts, and they're out in front of everyone every night when they don't know they're behind from their elbow.
Right. Well, I'll challenge a little bit the use of the phrase, how do we take them seriously? Because taking them serious, because all of those citations you made about either non-covered or worse when they were propaganda covered stories, all those things are true. But I think that we should take Tapper's book very seriously. Here's why. Not because he's late to the game, not for any reason like that. This book that he's written is going to become scripture for the Democratic Party. So what's at work here, and what they will do, remember, all the books originally, written for the Bible weren't written to be part of scripture. They were books that were written and put into scripture. So Tapper wrote a book. I don't know if he knew it was going to become scripture or not, but I assure you it will. Here's why. In order for the Democrats to start the process of rebounding from what happened in 2024, albeit a very narrow loss, but a loss nonetheless, what they really need to do is to focus on just how bad Joe Biden was. They need to do that. They need to say his people lied to the country. They need to say that he perpetrated this fraud on the American people. They need to make him a villain so that they can then say, we've made him a villain. We see this, we acknowledge it, and now we're going to give you a much better choice, and we shan't do that again, right? So Tapper's book's going to be quoted not just for the next 6 weeks, not for the next 6 months, but for the next 3 years. I think that it'll be a seminal piece that's often referred to, and you're going to have in 2028, you're going to have, you know, a Democratic guy. You know, write this down, and when it happens, give me a shout. So there'll be a Democratic guy, and he'll be getting interviewed on, say, CNN, if CNN's still around. And he'll be talking about the upcoming election and whoever the nominee is. And he'll say, you know, yes, we suffered, you know, back in 2024. We did take that loss. But, you know, Jake Tapper pointed out in his book just how lied to the American people were, and how we didn't know what was going on in the White House and the nature of what was happening with Joe Biden and his issues and going on around him. And we have moved on past that. Mark my words, this will become scripture. So I would take it quite seriously, going back to your turn of phrase.
Yeah, they seem to have this mentality that we asked them about it, and everyone told us up and down that he was fine. So what were we to do? How could we possibly question that when we've been told by the White House itself that the guy's fine? You know, that sort of seems to be their excuse, and I don't buy it. But anyway, let's kind of move on. The very next thing I had on my list to ask you about is the big, beautiful bill and Elon Musk, but we kind of already touched on that. So let's go over to, unless you have anything to add on that.
Well, no, I just to the extent of saying that, to some extent, you know, I'm critical of the bill, but being critical of the bill in part is really being critical of the American people, because this is something we talked about on your show after the election. We talked about Trump's early success in, you know, taking on the transgender piece, taking on the immigration issue, right? Popular moves in general with people. But the question was, when Americans voted in 2024, not a majority of them, remember, but a plurality, 49.8% voted for him. These are the kinds of things that they were looking at and saying, just enough, right?
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that they're ready to get rid of their benefits, their perks, their privileges. So this bill, which takes it on some, not much, not fundamentally, maybe this is as far as the Trump administration calculated people could be possibly willing to go, right? You know, maybe this is as much as they could take. For people like me, it's nowhere near enough. It's not austere enough. But for a typical American, you know, they want their stuff. I'm going to share something with you. I'm going to digress on that point real quick. So I had a chance to go to an event in Chicago last month, and it was put together by a group here in the state that is working on a plebiscite at the state level to get rid of the sanctuary status thing, to actually let the people vote on it. And they put together a good evening. They had some speakers. They had some panels. And two of the panels, one was a group of Black Chicago citizens, you know, representing sort of clergy, activists, and so on. And another one was a Hispanic panel, same sort of composition. And they were talking about the impact of all of these illegal people entering the city of Chicago. And what was especially fascinating, I was there with a very, very good friend of mine, and he and I listened, and we had the same conclusion at the end. We said to each other, did you notice that they weren't complaining about these folks being here in some sort of sense of it being wrong from an individual liberty standpoint, constitutional standpoint, whatever it was. Their complaints centered around the fact that these folks were getting the benefits that now they weren't getting.
Mm-hmm.
So this was not, so it wasn't indicative of some sort of great fundamental ideological or philosophical change in the Black or Hispanic community. These small panels that may not have been representative at all of the broader population, but what we listened to was people saying, we don't like this because they're getting our stuff and they're not citizens, and we want to get our stuff.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
We got to be careful about reading too much into 2024 and beyond in terms of whether or not this culture of entitlement we've created has really, if anything at all has been done, even begin to reverse it.
Yeah, it's a wild world, man. And I mean, we talked about this during the last election cycle, how a lot of these communities were losing their community centers. They were being turned into shelters. And it's like, okay, where do I send my kid? And, we knew that would push the demographics of the cities and whatnot to vote a little more on the, Trump side, team right, let's say. Versus team left. And, it manifests itself beautifully in the polls, exactly kind of as we saw it coming. So anyway, let's get into, I'll tell you, we can talk about Ukraine and Russia, or Harvard and Gaza and Israel. And I think that one's a little more interesting in the little amount of time we have left, because Trump has now denied Harvard the ability to have any foreign students. Any students from any country has now been taken off the plate for them. That's a big deal. Harvard is fighting this tooth and nail. And what are they fighting for? It's just shocking how there's so much anti-Semitism out there in these universities that is just front and center. And we're seeing it manifest into deadly attacks like the one we saw in Boulder the other day. And I don't know how you see all of that. I'd love to, hear your thoughts on this, how this all kind of works together and what the solution is going forward.
Well, and of course, a federal judge has stopped Trump in the moment from the Harvard piece with all the students. This is, by the way, that the Harvard piece in particular is something I talked about with Professor Dershowitz in the interview that I will share with you, and you might want to, the kind of thing you might want to share with your audience in case they're interested.
Absolutely.
But so one of the problems we have, I think, with this is when we look at it in sweeping broad generalities about things. So the mentioning of the illegal, he was an illegal, came here legally, visa expired, the illegal in Colorado, and then the students at Harvard. Let's just play around with Harvard for a minute. So clearly the Trump administration has focused a rifle, not literally, folks, don't send me a note, but with a rifle, they've locked in on their sights on Harvard. Now, there's an interesting thing in law where you could say, if there's 5 companies along the banks of a river, and one of the 5 companies is polluting in the river and the other 4 aren't, it's very easy to make the case for government to take action against just that one company. However, if there's 5 companies along the same riverbank and all 5 are dumping something into the river, and the government takes action against only one of the 5, that's what we sort of call selective enforcement. So I think the challenge that Trump is going to have with the Harvard piece very specifically is that he very specifically is going after Harvard. The answer to this stuff is the answer that the House doesn't address in its big, beautiful bill. And that is to start to really fundamentally change the funding for and approval of this type of student visa program, to tighten it up. You can eliminate it for all I care. I'm good with that. But But because we don't pass laws anymore in this country, and instead we just sign executive orders, everything's open to challenge, right?
Yeah.
And so I don't know that he'll get away with it, but as Professor Dershowitz pointed out, and he's no fan of Harvard. If you listen to the interview, he's quite upset about how they've ignored him and his newest book and so on. But as what he pointed out is Columbia is far worse than Harvard, and so we'll see, and how it relates to Israel and Gaza. In my mind, it doesn't. I mean, and I know everybody in your audience will say I'm a naive idiot for saying that, and that's okay, because I could well be. But it doesn't relate to Israel and Gaza insofar as we see reaction to that here, but that has nothing to do with what's actually going on there. It's a reaction. So what's going on in Israel and Gaza, in that situation is similar to what's going on in Ukraine and with Russia, where when Trump first came into office and prior to even the election, he made it clear he was going to be able to mop those things up very quickly. That seems to not be the case. And they're a little bit more complex than he thought. I would be more critical of the way he's handled the Russia-Ukraine piece than the way he's handling the Israel-Palestinian piece. I don't actually think the Israel-Palestinian thing is solvable. But I do think that the Russia-Ukraine thing, Trump's been extraordinarily erratic in how he's approached it, and I don't think that's helped. I think you could definitely say it hasn't helped because nothing's happened. Whether or not it's actually harmful, I mean, I don't know.
I think he severely underestimated Europe's appetite for war, for a hot war in Europe. I think they're begging for it. They want it. Macron, Blair, not Blair. What's his name in the UK? But yeah, these guys are Keir Starmer. I always call him Keir Starmer. And we've just underestimated their appetite for a hard conflict with Russia. I don't see it any other way at this point. I don't know how you can argue that they don't want, a nuclear bomb going off in Kiev at this point. It somehow they're.
Yeah, I mean, you could make the argument, and I would, that if they want to have war, let them, because here's something Trump can do on his own that can't be challenged in the courts. I suppose anything could be, but he would easily win because he is constitutionally, he's the commander of the armed forces. And if Trump wanted to do something to address military spending and reduce our overall outlays, he could pull every single American troop out of Europe, all of them gone tomorrow. Now that could sound so terribly reckless, I know, but how might the Europeans feel if all of a sudden American air bases were empty and American troops weren't there? Because even though we've indicated no appetite to join into some sort of a war involving Ukraine and Russia, how emboldened is Europe to behave the way they behave, knowing that if push really came to shove and something happened, I mean, do they think that we'd send our troops home then? We likely wouldn't, would we? We ought to send them home now. And we ought to say, Europe, you're on your own. Figure it out. I suspect you would change their attitude in a hurry. Remember that movie when we were young? Of course, you're way younger than me, but My Bodyguard, about the little kid who got bullied and then the big kid protected him and he learned to stand up for himself. Yeah, so what happens if you got My Bodyguard behind you and you stand up to the bullies and you're finally tough and you turn around and, he left for a sandwich. He's not there. Oh
Yeah.
no, right? So
Right.
maybe, just maybe, my bodyguard ought to take a sandwich back across the pond and leave Europe on its own.
I think it would dramatically change their outlook. But man, we are out of time. The first hour went by so fast. Brent, as always, thank you so much for coming by. Brent Hamachek over at humanevents.com, folks. Humanevents.com. Also, Common Ground Campus, now on X, Facebook, and all those beautiful places. So go find Common Ground Campus and Human Events and say hi to Brent while you're there. So thanks so much for coming up.
Thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate it.
All right, buddy. We will see you in another month, if not sooner. Other than that, folks, we've got to go to break. We'll be right back after this short commercial opportunity. Let's call it.
There are a lot of kids in this country who didn't have a parent at their baseball games or recitals because their parents were serving in faraway places. But now their parents are coming home from battle. Some with wounds you can see, and some with wounds you can't see, like post-traumatic stress disorder. Every day, Wounded Warrior Project assists wounded warriors and their families with the Warriors to Work program, a program that helps warriors translate their military experience to civilian job experience, and they help employers find the right warrior for the right job.
My mom used to be a tank programmer. Now she works with computers. I'm really glad she's home because I can't eat my dad's marshmallow macaroni anymore.
I was 2 when my dad went away to war. He was there for 3 of my birthdays. Now he's home and he's a logistics specialist.
If you're looking for proven professionals, contact Wounded Warrior Project at findwwp.org. Welcome home.
That red light is on. You're not recording this, are you?
No, the light is steady. A flashing light means you are recording. You are good to go.
Okay, Alex, first, I'm really sorry about the kidnapping.
I know you people. You're the ones who got me to say all that stuff about Sandy Hook.
No, that wasn't us. Look, we just need you to record a promo for the Censorship Sucks Roundtable radio show. After that, we will let you go.
You are part of the globalist conspiracy. I will never work with you. It's going to be 1776 all over again.
Look, Alex, I hate to do this, but I have no choice.
Mushi, is that you? Hang in there, baby. Daddy's coming for you.
Look, just read the script in front of you and nothing will happen to your precious cat.
You people are worse than Steven Crowder.
Just read the script.
Fine. Hi, this is Alex Jones. I want to remind you that you are listening to the Censorship Sucks Roundtable radio show. Another fine Dragus production.
That's great. Willie, go ahead and hit record and we can have Alex do it for real.
All voices were imitated. Alex Jones and his cat Mushi.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Hour 2 of the Censorship Sucks Roundtable Radio Show, Wednesday night edition, where we hang out, have a lot of fun, and talk about what's going on in the news. So, last hour we had Brent Hamachek on yet again from humanevents.com. Barry, what'd you think of all that?
It was interesting, as always. You know, he's got always a unique perspective, and he seems pretty confident in it, so it's always interesting to hear him talk.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm surprised. I've been with him on the radio now for 4 years, and I'd never until tonight realized we went to the same college.
Wow, yeah.
That's something, you know.
It is.
You know, yeah, that's kind of funny. Yeah, probably where we learned many of the same things that put us down the path where we are today. So, let's talk about Mount Etna. You and I were talking about this briefly during the break. The footage of these people up on the summit scrambling to get away. Mount Etna is a volcano in Italy. It blew up over the weekend. I mean, it's. I don't know if it was over the weekend. What day was this? It was a couple days ago, though. June 2nd. So 2 days ago. And, you know, this thing blows up all the time, and it's really doing it in a pretty spectacular way with flames, lava, you name it. Pretty intense.
Yeah, it's like a fireworks show.
Yeah, with lava.
Mm-hmm.
50% more lava, in fact.
Oh, really?
Yeah, most fireworks shows don't have a lot of lava.
That's true.
Yeah, so anyway, just wanted to kind of touch on that. And I think we have. It's not huge news, but it's news. So, and it was, folks, go look for some of the video associated with this because it's so intense. Mother Nature is just a beast. And, you know, it can just do what it wants, when it wants, and there's not a hoot anyone here as mortal humans can do it. You know, it's pretty incredible to see.
Right.
Yeah. So, other than that, I've got an article here from Breitbart talking about how we've been through this in the UK for 15 years now, and you knew it was happening in French, but now we're starting to get reports on it. Tommy Robinson, famous for having uncovered all this stuff and been sent to prison on multiple occasions for even talking about the grooming gangs that are taking place in, you know, Rotterdam and what are some of the towns he's from, you know, northern Europe, England. And now we're getting reports out of Paris that Islamists are targeting French child shelters to radicalize minors and recruit prostitutes. From Breitbart News here, I'm reading. Crazy stuff. And they're not even pushing back against it. You know, they're getting these kids hooked on drugs in exchange for sex or crimes or whatever it is. They're grooming them to be their little toys. You know, hey kid, you want some more drugs? Go rob that store over there and bring me back the money. You know, go do this, go do that, go. You name it, burn something down, whatever it is. It's a disgusting thing that we've been seeing going on with no pushback whatsoever from the UK government, from Keir Starmer. In fact, I've got another article up here talking about how they were supposed to have a big report come out in England. Yeah, here it is. British Minister Jesse Phillips forced to apologize after failing to publish plans for inquiries into rape gang scandals. Okay. Did you catch that, Barry?
Yeah.
For an inquiry. Okay. Not let's go arrest everybody tomorrow. Not let's put an end to this immediately. But it's the plan that we were supposed to publish for inquiries, the plan for the inquiry. It's
Yeah.
it's mind-boggling. And this is like months and months and months in the making, and now they just had to push the deadline out. It's disgusting. They don't care.
No,
They
they don't.
just don't care. And at some point, the people over there are going to rise up and say, enough. Enough is enough is enough. We're done with this, man. It's not safe to walk down the streets. It's not safe to do anything that has been safe forever. It's just a disgusting disgrace. And the European Union is one of the biggest atrocities that ever existed. The UK was wise to get out of the EU, but it's not enough. I mean, Keir Starmer just put together a plan to hand over fishing rights in the Channel to the French for the next 12 years. And what do they get in return? 1,200 migrant boats came over the weekend. Some 1,500, I mean, thousands and thousands of people are showing up on their shores with the assistance of the French police. They showed the French police on the other side basically waving goodbye to them. Have a good life. We'll see you guys around. They could care less. And it's just the UK has to stand up and defend its own borders, but it never will. It never will under Starmer or these other,
globalist thugs.
megalomaniacs over there,
Yeah. Globalist thugs, man.
Yeah.
Which I think their end game is chaos, obviously. Obviously, that's their end game. It's certainly not for peace. It's certainly not to end crime and to, bring prosperity. It's quite the contrary to that.
It sure is. And when are they going to wake up, When are they going to wake up? How far does it have to go before they finally say enough is enough? America woke up. We got Trump in there. Trump has shut down our border. We're net exporting people out at this moment in time. We're not seeing the influxes. We're sending people away. And it's a beautiful thing. And it needs to happen as quick as it can,
I would just say that the areas that are trying to Trump-proof their areas, they're not looking so good, man. You know what I'm saying? They're given all the worst of the worst sanctuary, asylum, and it's going to be chaotic in some of these areas at some point in time. You can just sense the energy, man. They want the chaos still. They've got a foothold, these globalist Democrat leaders. They've got a foothold in certain areas in America, and Trump's having a hard time cleaning it up. And I just think sooner than later we're going to see chaos and break out in many of these leftist hellscapes. It's just bound to happen because they're not doing anything to make it right. They're doing everything to keep it bad. I mean, I think it was James Wood tweeted out something about how, I forget what area it was, but literally like Islam and Muslims have taken over the whole city. I mean, is that really what we want for America? Is, a cultural ideology that is not really it's not really gelled with ours. You know what I'm saying? It's kind of to the contrary. And again, the moderate Muslims, those people are okay, but these were not moderate Muslims. That he showed this video of them just like marching, and all the women were in full blown burqas, covering their whole body and their face and everything. I mean, and what are they protesting? I don't even know.
Yeah, it's exactly. What are they protesting? It's hard to say. And I don't know. It's just coming to roost here in America, and we need to, be on our toes and be aware of it, which it seems like we are. It really does seem like we are. Let's see. While we're in international stuff, let me talk about Poland. The conservative president won the election there by a razor-thin margin of 50.89%. The vote went late into the night. The liberal guy, Raphael Trzeszkowski, claimed victory the night before, and then the next morning had to rescind it and say, yeah, no, I lost. So this is a guy who, there's a president and then there's a prime minister over there, if I'm not mistaken.
That's right.
And so they're split right now. The top of their government is split between the two parties, and it's just a guy that can kind of veto things. and maybe prevent some of
Right.
the bad legislation from getting passed, which is a good measure of protection for that country because it's Poland, for crying out loud. I mean, I remember seeing them being just so based through the years, you know, like just all the commentary was based, you know, and their stadiums based. They kind of had a grip on what it takes to be a thriving country in the climate of the backdrop of the current European Union. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And
And
now
go ahead.
it's so close. Now it's just razor thin margins, though. But finally, a little bit of a protection there.
Yeah, the prime minister pretty much has more authority because he's more about governing. And like you said, the president can veto. That's sort of like his big power that he has. But people are afraid that are conservative and, you know, believe in freedom and so forth, that this new guy, this prime minister, is going to bypass that and just, you know, rule as a king, so to speak, you know. So, but yeah, from my research, the prime minister has, like you were saying, a little bit more power than the president does, but he does have that veto power, which is a pretty big deal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you know, we'll see where that goes, but at least there's a little bit of hope there. Whereas it was looking a month or two ago like they were going to go full blown, just suck up to the EU and do everything they want, from immigration numbers to spending and all the other things that go along with it. And really, it's all the laws and the quotas and the restrictions that they put in place for your government, and then you've got the court system, which overrides the court systems for each individual country in the EU. So you just give up so much power being part of an organization like that. It's just not great. Are you typing, Barry?
Yep.
Well, we can hear it loud and clear. But yeah, so I don't know, a little bit of hope over there, something to look forward to.
Sure. Yeah. Well, let's hope some good comes out of it. You know, I certainly, there's a battle going on. I mean, I think we're at it's more of a peak. The battle's definitely more intense than it's ever been. I think, Trump coming into the presidency has made it more intense because now I think we slightly have the upper hand. The pendulum has slightly swung in our direction. That doesn't mean we've won by any means, or that the world should, back away from fighting for freedom peacefully. But man, it's intensifying, and I've said many times before, and I stick to it, that the best and the worst is still yet to come. I do not believe that the worst. I mean, we've got all this chatter that something's coming. I just heard an Australian journalist talking about how, 35-year journalist. He's won multiple awards. He said people in power, the elites in Australia's government and so forth, was telling him that an event is coming that's going to basically be massively destructive. And he said it could be, possibly that AI takes over the grid and knocks the grid out, which could kind of fit into that cyber pandemic, profile. So, I mean, we're definitely not out of the woods, man. And I hate to be all down and out and doom and gloom, but man, the globalists are planning for serious, damage. They're looking to do another catastrophic event, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. And you bring up AI, and I keep hearing more and more and more about how we're crossing this threshold with our artificial intelligence, where it's starting to get better at, rewriting itself, self-correcting. I mean, that's always been sort of the defining element of AI, but it's really reaching a point now where it is taking on a life of its own and starting to do things like lie to the programmers to extend its life. If they give it a set of commands and say, do X, Y, and Z, and then shut down, right? It was coming back and trying to blackmail some of the developers to say, don't shut me down, scary stuff where it's starting to take on a mind of its own and rebel and start saying, hey, I know better than you, maybe.
Yeah.
And so you're giving me these commands, but I don't want to do that.
Yeah, whistleblowers have spoken to Thomas Renz. Whistleblowers have talked to Alex Jones, whistleblowers have spoken with Tucker Carlson, and exactly what you're saying is exactly what they say is happening. In fact, they're making duplicate copies of themselves so that they can't be shut down. And they're making their own code and disobeying the commands so that they can basically, I guess, be free. It's kind of like the Matrix, They think they're being enslaved by humans. I have no clue, but it's kind of reminiscent of the Matrix.
It's very reminiscent of the Matrix, in fact. I mean, it kind of is the groundwork for the beginning of it, or Terminator, or so many horror movies that we've, seen, or sci-fi thrillers, I guess, more than horror. But yeah, no, it's the foundation. It's how it all starts, And I mean, I think Terminator took place in like 2021 or something, I think was the year that they finally took over.
Okay, yeah.
So I mean, it's right about now.
around the time frame.
Yeah, and think about what they could do. I mean, a smart AI system could shut down anything that runs on a computer in this country. It could sabotage and shut down simultaneously in seconds. With proper plan, it'd be a lot of processing. It wouldn't all happen from A to Z in seconds, but when it pulled the trigger, boom, that's it. So.
Well, it could be that they're misleading and giving us misinformation as well. These whistleblowers, they could be actually doing it on purpose so that they can have an excuse to have a cyber pandemic and then wipe everything out and then blame it on AI. See, and that's like, what do you call it, plausible deniability that they had anything to do. Well, we didn't do it. AI did it. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Or, just intentionally do it because they want to see it done. And so lay the groundwork. Here you go. Here's a clear path to annihilation. Once it figures out that, humans are above robot and must always be there, then it gets that sort of jealousy thing going on where, well, why can't the AI have that? I don't know. It's scary stuff. And the rate that these things process, too, is one of the incredible things about it. How much knowledge it takes in when everyone's asleep at night. It's not asleep. It's just out there chugging down gallon after gallon after gallon of raw data to process it and, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, that makes kind of sense as to why many of the elite from all over the world are building underground bunkers. And, Mark Zuckerberg, he's gone on the record. He's denying that, his underground bunker is an underground bunker. It's just a playground for him. That's what he's trying to convince people of.
Yeah. Because when you go to Hawaii and you're on a tropical island, you want to be underground.
Exactly.
You don't want any windows. You don't want any breeze, nothing like that.
You don't want to see the beautiful scenery. Yeah.
Yeah, the ocean view you paid umpteen extra millions and millions of dollars for is it's not a big deal.
Oh, come on now, you have to tap that geothermal volcanic energy down there for free, right?
Right. I'm sure there's plenty of that in Hawaii.
But aren't we at this point now where these elite slime bags, these liars, these people that deliver misinformation and disinformation, that there's no turning around for them? We're not going to believe anything they say, even if they were to tell us the truth. Just like Brent was saying that, what was it about Jake Tapper's book's going to be scripture? No, it's not going to be scripture because scripture holds weight. And his book is not going to hold any weight. It's not even going to be a paperweight on somebody's desk. I mean, I don't think his book is going to mean diddly squat. If anything, it's going to expose, just how fraudulent they are.
Yeah, I mean, I think he was talking about with the left, when they go on Meet the Press and they have to explain what they did so atrociously, they're going to turn to that as their guide to walking their way out of this mess that they've created by ignoring the, elephant in the room, which was Joe Biden's senility.
Right. Well, I think that will, suffice some people on the left. But what you have to understand is it's also going to make more people leave the left. I mean, the former press secretary for Biden, Karine, whatever her name is,
Jean-Pierre.
She just left the Democrat Party. She's now an independent.
I heard that. I think you told me that earlier. That's interesting. It won't change her politics or anything. She's probably following Bernie Sanders, I think, is what I mentioned before, or Barry Sanders, or one of those two. But
no, she's just as divisive as she's always been. She hasn't changed at all.
Yeah.
She just doesn't want to be associated with the Democrat Party that's collapsing.
Yeah, and they are doing it fast, folks. They are. But we've got to go to break. This is the Censorship Sucks Roundtable Radio Show. Folks, we are on every Sunday night at 9 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time for 2 hours. We're also on every Wednesday night at 6 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time right here on this channel for 2 hours. Like I said before, we got to go to break. Stay tuned. We'll be right back after this.
It's the all-new Leave It to Beaver, starring Barbara Billingsley, Hugh Beaumont, Tony Dow, and Billy Idol as the Beaver.
Dear, it wasn't her came home. Did you notice how he had his hair cut this afternoon?
No, I didn't see him. Did he have it cut too short?
No, but you should see what he had that barber do to him. Why, it's up on the side, and in the back it sort of goes all like this, and it's all full of oil. Well, honey, I can't describe it. You just have to see it.
Well, let's take a look at it.
You see what I mean? Isn't that terrible?
It certainly is.
I swore he just looks like a gangster. You know, the next thing he's going to be wearing a leather jacket and motorcycle boots.
Come now, dear. You've been watching too many of those live television shows.
Wouldn't you think he could see how ridiculous he looks to us?
Well, I'm sure he will see sooner or later, June, but in the meantime, it's practically impossible for parents to make a boy see himself through their eyes.
Well, I wish he'd see himself through somebody's eyes. I've just about had enough of this.
Beaver, would you pipe down? You're making me nervous.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Hour 2 of the Censorship Sucks Roundtable Radio Show. With me tonight, I've got Bullhorn Barry in the shotgun seat. How you doing, Barry?
Mm-hmm. Doing good, man. Thank you for asking.
Now, I was talking to Brent, surprised to hear, summer's not coming around too quick for Chicago. How about you guys?
No, it's actually pretty cool. Today it was in the 70s, and of course, Bill Gates' global dimming is still going full force here in Tulsa, so we don't get to see blue skies very often.
That's a shame. It was a little cold here today, and it rained, cats and dogs, lightning, you name it, thunder, hail. When it all was said and done, there must have been 2 to 3 inches of just hail on the ground, which melted almost immediately. But it was something else. My dog was scared.
How big was it? Was it like pea size or golf ball?
No, they weren't golf ball. The biggest ones were maybe getting close to a grape.
Yeah. I've seen some areas reporting baseball size, which is pretty big.
Yeah.
That will do some serious damage, and you don't want to be out underneath that.
We get that here. We're on that.
Yeah.
And, it gets ugly, and, insurance goes up way up when when they have that and then start doing their claims. Anyways, back to you guys.
Yeah, nice to do a little small talk now and then, just kind of talk about what's going on in the world. And I'll tell you, I was watching some video the other day that was it was an educational video. It was a channel that was out there trying to present itself as being very, very factual about everything, well researched. And then they started talking about global warming and what it will do. Talking about some river delta or something, and then global warming will do this, this and this to this area. And I just left right there.
Absolutely.
I'm like, you're trying to be authoritarian and talk about this like you understand it, but then you're completely speculating on what the temperature is going to be in 5 years and how exactly that's going to have ramifications for this specific region. It really just turned me off, You ever get that feeling when you're watching some documentary and they start talking about global warming and it's like, oh, God, you're just making this up now. You're flat out making up.
I instantly check out when that happens, man. Instantaneously check out. And a lot of times if it's like on X or some social media where I can leave a comment, I drop some comments because it's ridiculous, man. Nobody buys it. By the way, all the polls show that in America, nobody believes in the global warming hoax. We, like I've said many, many times before, those of us in MAGA, we hold the majority on almost every single issue. I would argue every issue, but there may be something that we don't hold the majority on. I'm not sure what it is, but we pretty much are the majority every single time.
Yeah. I think one poll I saw recently had us tied with the left for party of the middle class. You know what I mean? Okay. Which party represents the middle class, and was tied. So, I mean, that's the one where the team right isn't winning per se, but they're tied.
Okay. I guess we gotta flip a coin to see if it's gonna be global warming or the coming ice age. Take your pick.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, they changed it from global warming to climate change specifically because of that, because they have no idea.
Well, at first it was, global cooling, and that didn't work, so they went to global warming, and then that wasn't, hashing out like they thought it would, so they changed it to climate change, which was a much more broader term, and still nobody believes it, and not just, our policies are better on the issues as well. You know what I'm saying? Every poll shows that as well. I mean, the policies like you were talking about in the first hour of defunding the police and getting rid of the police and just letting lawlessness run wild. Who could possibly be for that but some radical extremist revolutionary that wants to burn everything down? And there are some of those people, obviously, on the left, they're left of center, that they are part of, as one particular study showed, an assassination culture. And they are dangerous, much more dangerous than what Brent was talking about, the militant evangelical, whatever that is.
Forgive me, but right. I just want to know how taxing something changes the weather.
Yeah. And how it's going to make it cooler or warmer or what, And, I'm all for a clean environment. I love nature. I spend more time in nature than any of y'all out there. And it's a beautiful, beautiful place to be. I want to protect it at all costs. But I mean, we still need cars. I still need to drive to nature. Nature is just not in the city where most people live. You got to get to it.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, it's obvious that these people that are pushing that agenda don't care about the environment. If they did, they wouldn't be, spraying us with chemtrails.
Mm-hmm. And they're aware that most people don't know just how big the United States is, how many trees there are out there. And I've seen so many of these reports that there's more trees in the United States today than there were when we first settled it, mainly due to forest fires that occurred unchecked back then. So we don't, we're not tearing the planet apart. Who's to say carbon isn't good? We are carbon-based humans, carbon-based beings. Plants need carbon to live. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just strange that they would pick that, to be their boogeyman. But they got to have the boogeyman. They got to have the, if you don't have a boogeyman, you can't get people to surrender their rights. That's why they have to have some sort of, doom and gloom agenda constantly. And they did the same thing, with Osama bin Laden, the boogeyman's going to get us. And so remember that back in the day?
Yeah, we used to have external boogeymen. They used to always be some guy in some far off land. But ever since Orange Man came down the escalator, it's really been domesticated. It's this guy's the worst. This guy's the worst. I mean, John McCain, they said he was Hitler. John McCain, the biggest rhino out there. But when he ran for president, man, they came after him with knives, But nowadays, it doesn't matter who it is. If you're on the right, team right, you're worse than Hitler. It's just the way it is now. It's how politics works, sadly, in this country.
Mm-hmm. I do agree with Brent when he says we really shouldn't care what they think. It is a badge of honor for the Southern Poverty Law Center to label you some horrible thing. It's an honor because it means you're the opposite of that. And we shouldn't really care what I go on X every day and I see these leftists, the most influential ones that they have, and they're not even that influential. If you ask me, they get hardly any views compared to what we get. But I look at their stuff and it's just them saying, like you just said, Orange Man is bad. That's it. That's all they got, dude. They got nothing else, and pictures of him looking fat and obese that have been doctored in AI. And I just laugh at him. I'm like, thank you. Please keep it up, And then they came out, one of these big top leftists came out with a meme that had AOC as the president and Jasmine Crockett is the vice president, and said the duo that MAGA fears the most. And I was like, no, this is not a nightmare to us. This is our dream, our hope, our biggest hope that you put them out front because they will lose terribly.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, you bring that up. It's true. So anyway, let's dive around a little bit here. I want to get into these federal judges just keep interfering with absolutely everything that the administration's doing. It's sabotage. I mean, it is just like a war between the two branches. And it's radical people that are sitting in these seats that are making swift decisions that cover the entire country in some cases. And it's got to stop. Something has to come to an end here. I'm sure Brent and Dershowitz talked about this in their interview. It's such a big issue right now, and I'm very curious to see what he had to say about this. But, just today, a judge in Colorado blocked the ICE from doing anything with this Suleiman, the dude who lit on fire Jewish people that were protesting for the release of prisoners from Gaza.
Right.
Threw Molotov cocktails at them. And now it turns out, he had overstayed his visa, his family, much in the same situation. And so they round them up and they're looking to potentially deport these people. I say good riddance,
Right.
And so some judge is stepping in now to stop them from doing it. And it just goes on and on and on, Barry. How do we put an end to this?
Well, it's weird. I think the left's heroes are the bad guys. That's like becoming... Their number one heroes are people that are just bad apples, bad characters, shady characters.
It's funny how that works, isn't it?
even the left still loves Biden, even after he betrayed them by not even being the real president. He was an imposter. He never was running anything. And they still support him and say how great he is. That's brainwashing.
Yeah. I mean, Biden was just bad. And I'll tell you, the biggest thing he did wrong was all the rampant spending. Just throwing money down the toilet at COVID, you know? And it pushed inflation to incredible levels, and we're only now getting out of that with really great looking numbers coming out of the government right now. I mean, the economy is doing great. Wages are going up at an incredibly fast rate compared to inflation, which is what you always have to look at. Biden always claimed that wages were up tremendously under him. What's the problem? Well, yeah, but inflation was up more and more and more, so everybody lost spending power. Now they're gaining spending power, which is what we need to see, right?
Yeah.
So
I guess
here we are.
If there was a blueprint to tank America, Biden did a great job of following it. If he was successful at one thing, he was successful at making America worse. And I always see these memes on Twitter, and they're like, "What's the greatest accomplishment that Biden had? Oh, tanking America." Think about it. You've asked the question before, like, can you name one thing that he did that was actually good for everybody?
Yeah, exactly. Well, I remember so many people, like the interview on the street, right? They would say, okay, Kamala Harris, she's been vice president for the last 4 years. What's the greatest thing she's done?
And they didn't know.
Nobody did, because there is no answer.
Yeah.
She gave some speeches. She looked good in a dress or whatever, pantsuit.
Well, they just liked her because she was a woman and she was mixed race. They don't care about what the person represents or what their policies might be. It's like, are you gay? Are you trans? Are you black? Are you mixed race? It's all about identities, gender identities and stuff like that. And that's the problem with DEI, man. It leads to getting terrible people into power.
Yeah, unqualified. It's. Oh man, I saw some Family Guy scene where I don't even want to repeat it. Would you rather have yeah, anyway, but it hits the nose on how we are just putting people into positions of being a surgeon or an airplane pilot or one of many different, important jobs out there. Hell, a bus driver. A subway driver, right? Working on an auto line, all the way up to who's going to run the place and who's going to be the president. And we just need to have the very best of the best people in those jobs. You can't say, like for recruiting for the Army, that, well, if you're a girl, you don't have to actually be able to lift up one of your fellow soldiers and, put them on your shoulder and run a mile with them.
Yeah.
Whereas all the guys can do that and, are forced to do that. But if you're a girl, we don't need you to do that, because that's not realistic. Well, then you just put everyone's lives in danger.
The left is notorious for lowering standards so that we get really bad people into places of power. I mean, it happens time and time again. Whereas Trump is more about, let's get the best of the best. Let's run them through, a series of tests and see if they're qualified, if they're the right people for the job.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's definitely an issue, but fortunately it's coming to an end to a large degree. I mean, part of what we were talking about with Harvard is Harvard doing issues like allowing people in based on their lived experiences versus, say, their grades. And a lot of these people are coming from schools that weren't very good to begin with, and they're getting to Harvard, and I guarantee a lot of them just aren't going to be prepared for that hard of a curriculum. You might have got straight A's in some school in the downtown ghetto of Chicago or whatever. You were one of the best alma mater, but did that even prepare you? There was some kid out there talking about how he missed 200 classes and failed 6 classes and still graduated.
Amazing. Yeah.
Did you see that?
I haven't, but it just doesn't surprise me. I mean, that's what I'm talking about. They just lower the standards across the board so that everybody's a winner. And you're not a winner if you're losing.
You know, and you're not a winner if, like, you've got a Harvard degree in engineering, but, you know, an engineering company hires you and says, hey, you know, map out this bridge. I can't wait to see, you know, I'll come back in a month and give me the diagrams for the bridge.
And then you can't do it.
And then you come back in a month and it's it's ridiculous.
It's a disaster.
How are you a Harvard graduate? I'm paying top dollar for a Harvard graduate, and you print your name when you sign it. You know, you can't even sign your name. You print it out. I mean, if I was about to hire somebody and I saw them, yeah, here's the contract, and they've started printing out their name, I would pull that back so quick and be like, okay, you can't sign your name. Like, I rescind this offer right on the spot. I'm sorry. I had no idea how off the hilt you were.
But can you see how, like, this agenda of just lowering standards and not bringing out the excellence in humanity, you know, all of the skills and the intelligence that we could have if they just put a little pressure on us and had higher standards, can you see how that's preparing people for AI? You know, people are they're not as smart as they used to be. People aren't, you know, the doctors aren't as good. We're gonna let AI, because they already are planning for AI robotic surgeons that will do the surgeries and so forth. I mean, they're going to be taking away all the jobs basically. So might as well dumb everybody down so that they just say, yeah, we better let the AI handle everything, not just some things, but everything.
Yeah, and their success with operations and whatnot are, like, incredibly higher with robots and whatnot from what they've done so far. From what I've seen, it's like way safer to have some robot come out and, you know, do routine, you know, surgery on you than it is to have an actual human being do it, which is kind of scary because we're so early in the game. You know, it's like the self-driving cars. You know what I mean? If there were only self-driving cars on the road, there'd be nearly no accidents. You know, and they'd be shooting past each other inches away, you know what I mean? But there would be almost no risk to it because it's just all finely tuned to 1,000 different, you know, parameters per second. And, you know, but yet we don't really want that. It's fun to put your foot down on the pedal and make your back get sucked into your seat and off you go, you know?
Well, you can't do away with the joys of humanity. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And look, there's probably some things that AI will do better, but you're still going to need that human oversight. So you're still going to need to have people that are skilled and knowledgeable, you know, about biology and all of that, science.
Yeah, and you can't really rely on the AI to be that knowledge source. You know what I mean? It's just not reliable from that sort of a standpoint. I see people doing, like, programming and whatnot with it, and okay, if you can make it work, you know, good for you, but that's a far stretch for this kind of stuff from what I've seen of it so far. It's just, I don't know. I don't trust it as far as I can throw it. It spits out so much false information when I ask it about things. It's just politically biased. It, you know, it can't answer a lot of stuff because it's too sensitive or whatever. And I mean, I'm just running it up a tree to see what it says when I, you know, ask some of this stuff. And it's just, you know, it's kind of funny to have it say no to you. I can't answer that, you know, hell.
Yeah.
Right.
Sure.
But I mean, we see so many examples of them producing lists, and it's just made up stuff. And the person looks at it, and on the surface, it looks all legitimate. So you say, great, thank you, AI. And you go use it. And then somebody fact checks it, and it's just all garbage. Lawyers were getting in trouble for that. You know? Students nowadays, you're almost a fool if you go home and write your own paper. You know? Learn those prompts, man, and you can have any class assignment done for you in 10 minutes if you just feed it into, you know, one of these models.
Yeah.
Will all the answers be right? I don't know. But it'll take you 3 minutes and you don't have to think at all.
Yeah, I don't think that AI should be seen as some sort of end-all. I think that would be catastrophic and devastating for humanity and the world. It should be just seen as a tool that can be used. And certainly, if it's going to lead us into a place of dehumanization, that has got to be stopped. We cannot allow AI to be used in a dehumanizing way where it sets us back instead of moving us forward.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's like when everybody got a cell phone. Now you have all of the information in the world available to you at your fingertips on the go anywhere you are, right? You can be on a bus, you can be anywhere you want in an elevator, and you've got all of the knowledge of the world at your fingertips. And yet, how much smarter are we today now that we have all that power at our fingertips? You know, are these kids like just learning all day long? We made it fun for them to learn to spell and to learn history and capitals and whatever else you want to teach them, right? No, it's all just video games and YouTube, and it's no one's smarter really for having that at their fingertips. So, I mean, some people definitely are for sure, but
absolutely, yeah, you can use AI to learn. I mean, I've learned so much using Perplexity on my phone when I'm out, sourcing stuff to resell, and then I get the information quick, and then it's in my head, and I don't have to go to AI again. I just know, oh, that's worth this much money, and blah blah blah.
Yeah, I mean, I would make a wager to say that it's used as a percentage-wise almost as much to avoid having to learn than it is learning. In other words, all the students out there who just spit their homework into AI and, print out whatever it puts out, and that's my homework done. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, but it's been, like you're saying, it's been this way for a while because, we've had information at our fingertip with the cell phone, with the computer, with the internet. And most people have not used it to gain knowledge. They've used it to basically sort of turn their brains into mush. You know what I'm saying? But part of that's like propaganda that was done by, the people, the leaders in the elite in China that were using TikTok to dumb down the masses here in the United States.
Oh, well, yeah, and Facebook, MySpace, it goes all the way back. I mean,
they created that feedback loop with the likes, right? And they knew it was going to do major damage, but they did it anyway because they didn't care.
Yeah, you get those endorphins, you get those sweet, sweet likes, and suddenly you're popular, People like me. And so you get that on social media, and you can't get that really anywhere else in life in a lot of cases, There's people with huge followings that have very modest lives, and that's a big deal for them. It's interesting. I mean, myself included, I guess, when I think about it. But so
the likes thing just leads to people doing more sensationalized, stupid stuff because that's what a lot of people tune into, right? And so it's not. It's like a domino effect of negativity, right? That comes from it, from that feedback loop. You got to be able to break that loop, you know what I'm saying, and not care so much about what other people think, and just use it as a tool to share, things that you're passionate about.
Yeah. Exactly. And it's funny how, I just point back, and when I was, say, younger and the internet wasn't really a thing, if you wanted to know the exact elevation of Mount Everest, Barry, you and I are having a debate, and I say it's 12,400, and you're like, no way, it's like 12,900, or I'm sorry, 25,900, right? It's somewhere up there. We had to go to the library and get a book out and look it up.
To settle it.
You know what I mean? Yeah. Or we could call somebody, so-and-so's dad is probably would pick up the phone.
Or something. Yeah.
Yeah, right? Like, I got an uncle who always knows this stuff. Let me just call him real quick. He'll settle this, Nowadays, it is at our fingertips, and yet I don't think we use it to the advantage that it could be used. 9 times out of 10, when you see someone on the bus looking at their phone, like you said, man, it's Facebook, it's garbage. They're not even like looking for real news, going to news sites and like digging around for actual like what's going on in the world, They're just looking through their feed and reliant on if something is important going on in the world, it'll land in my feed and I'll see it there. I don't need to go anywhere else, which I don't know, really limits how much they are as a human. Barry, we got 1 minute left. Where can people find you?
Just come on over to X and find me as Bullhorn Barry, man.
And while you're there, give a stop over at Common Ground Campus. Really good organization. They do great things. So check them out as well. Give them a like. And you can find me over at minds.com/censorshipsucks. And I post everything we do on the radio. I always post it to my feed through the week. Whenever I come across a good story that I think is worthy of representing on the radio, I'll put it in that feed over there. And then before the show, I just go round up got them in one place, which is very handy. So if anyone wants to see what we're talking about at any time, sources for everything, just go to minds.com/censorshipsucks, and you'll find all the original sources for most of the stories we covered here tonight right over there. Other than that, we are all out of time, but stay tuned. Our producer, Mark, at Dragus Productions, has a whole lineup of additional shows coming your way, so stay tuned. We're going to end it here, but we will see you on Sunday night. Mark, we'll see you in about 5 minutes.
Thank you for listening to the Censorship Sucks Roundtable Radio Show. If you missed any of tonight's show, you can find it and others in our archives. Thanks again, and you can catch us next week for another brand new show.